Hey, everybody, welcome back to the Chit Chat podcast. My name is Guy Magno. I'm your host. Thanks so much for joining us. I think this is our 11th episode. So if you're still here and you're listening, we really, really appreciate it. This has been a fun little exploration of neat, interesting people in our community that are doing fun stuff, that are passionate and they care about our community. So I've been enjoying talking to those people, and I'm just really thankful that you guys are here for it. I just got done talking to my friend, Katie Virnig. I've known Katie for a long time. She's a writer. She's worked in the ad space in Central Minnesota for a long time, and she's writing a book right now. And so we got to talk all about her book that she's writing, and even more than her book, just kind of about the creative process. And it was a treat, and I'm really, really excited for you to listen to it now. Katie, welcome. Thanks for joining us on the Chit Chat podcast. How you doing today?
Hey, Guy. I'm doing good. How are you?
I'm doing well. Okay, so normally we start with coffee, but you are a tea drinker, and so we have some tea. Full disclosure, when I texted you today that I needed to run an errand, it was to go get a teapot.
You forgot.
No. We decided like, I don't want to just like serve like a tea bag in a cup, and so we went and got an actual coffee.
That
or
is so above and beyond.
So
I'm going to give you 5 stars.
wow.
But here's the deal.
Mm-hmm.
I, in my old age,
Mm-hmm.
I'm almost 35 now, can't handle caffeine in the afternoon.
Oh yeah, me too.
No, so I need tea. I would prefer coffee, but I need to do tea.
Yeah, I got it.
Afternoon, I set the deadline at noon. Every day. Mm-hmm.
So about 12, 18 months ago, I forget exactly, I kicked caffeine completely.
And you're still on that.
Still on it.
Have not a drop.
I mean, like, if I'm somewhere and somebody serves a cup of coffee or something, like, I'll maybe drink a little bit. But, like, in general, like, when I'm drinking coffee, I'm drinking all decaf. I'm feeling much better having no caffeine in my system. So
Yeah, it's crazy.
I'm happy to be drinking tea with you today.
Thank you.
And sorry that I was a couple minutes late. I did need to get the tea.
Oh, that teapot is beautiful.
This is from a little place called, not TJ Maxx, what's the other one? Home Goods. Home Goods. Thanks for coming through. At first, when I found the teapots, they were like, I'm just gonna say it, they were old lady stuff. I mean, they were covered in like filigree and bad floral patterns. And I just asked the lady, I said, these ones are ugly. Do you have something that's just like a plain teapot? And she pointed me to the metal ones for like heating water in the stove. And I was like,
Right.
no, like I want to serve tea. And she's like, oh, I know what you're talking about. And then she brought me to, and they had a pile of these clear glass ones. And I was like, this is it. That's what I needed.
That's the winner.
Okay, so Katie, thanks for coming. Thanks for joining us. Would you just start just by introducing yourself?
Yes.
Tell our audience who you are and what you're up to in your life.
Yes. Okay. So I am first and foremost a writer. I have been freelance writing for almost 6 years. Will be 6 years in June. So I do freelance copywriting, and then for the last 3.5 years, I've been working on writing my first novel. Prior to that, I was in advertising and marketing around St. Cloud. And then in the last couple of weeks, I have been substitute teaching at Cathedral High School, teaching English.
All right.
And so that has been its own adventure, but so much fun.
Cool. So, I mean, you and I know each other, I think, ultimately from kind of the ad world.
Yeah.
Switch, I think I maybe photographed a project or two that you were on, and so that's kind of how we got to know each other. Man, I think maybe north of a decade ago, it's been that we've known each other. So yeah, and I mean, in that time, I've always known you as a writer in some capacity, even when you were kind of an account manager and so doing some of that stuff. So much of what you were focusing on was like, how do I tell this story well? And so when you told me that you were going to write a book, write a novel, I was maybe like the least surprised ever. It's just like, oh yeah, this feels exactly like a Katie thing. And yeah, it's been fun to kind of just like watch your process and kind of your journey on how to do that. I think one of the reasons I'm excited to talk to you today, besides the fact that you're my friend and I think you're interesting, but there are so many people that like talk about writing a book. I mean, if I hit a quarter for every time I heard someone say, I think I'm gonna write a book someday. Or even times that I've thought to myself, like, I wonder if I should write a book someday, which I shouldn't, by the way.
Do it.
But for all of those times that I've thought that or heard someone say that, like, I think I know like exactly one person in my life. I maybe know other people who've like written books a little bit, but nobody who has done this process that you've done, who's kind of given it what you've given it, and it has gone as deep as you have. And so it's just like really neat and really impressive. And so I was just hoping, would you just like unpack that a little bit? What is it like to come up with an idea that's kind of close and precious? And how do you start working on that and then exposing that little, that little story and that baby to the world? And yeah, just tell us a little bit about that process.
Yeah. I mean, had I known going in how much work it was going to be, I'm not going to say I wouldn't do it, because I totally would still do it. But wow,
What would have changed if you knew it was this much work? What would have changed?
My goal setting, probably.
Okay. Yeah.
Because you know me, I like to set very ambitious goals for myself, and I think I just royally misunderstood what it would take to do this. And to do it, I guess there are multiple ways to do it, and to do it to the caliber that aligned with the vision in my head. And so a lot of times with creative endeavors and with writing or any sort of art, it's like there's this discrepancy between your taste and what you can do.
Yeah.
And so part of the challenge then becomes trying to close that gap, which can't be faked. And so the only way to get from point A to point B is to just put reps in and begin. And so for me, my book idea sort of came from a workshop in Minneapolis at a writing studio. It was just a basic creative writing class, and through a prompt that I did in class, I came up with this idea of writing this novel about this influencer character. And right then and there, I just knew I needed to write a book. Again, not knowing what that even meant. And then into 2020, I started taking some online writing classes specific to fiction and novel writing, because you may or may not know this about me, but I do have a degree in journalism, but I never worked in the journalism industry. But writing has always been a part of a lot of things that I do, and so I started by taking just a few multi-week classes through an organization called Catapult, which is an independent publisher in New York. At the time, they were offering all online programs because of COVID.
Sure.
So it actually ended up being a blessing for me, because had it not been the pandemic, their 1-year novel writing class would not have been online.
You would have had to go to New York for it.
So I would have had to been in New York,
Sure.
Exactly. So the fall of 2020, so the summer of 2020, I sort of started dabbling in scene writing through these classes, and then I had enough material to apply to this 1-year class, and I got in. And so 2020 and 2021 was really figuring out like what it takes to write a book, the structure, the character development, and just all of those things. And so that class wrapped in the fall of 2021. I had my first draft, and then I took that draft to another 1-year class in person at the Loft Writing Studio.
Is that on Washington?
That's right on Washington.
Yeah, I've driven past that so many
right by the Viking
times.
Stadium. Yeah, US Bank. So I did a 1-year in-person class there in 2022, wrote another draft. And then last year I hired an editor to help me. And that was wonderful, but also like it was hard.
Yeah.
Like it's just very hard to go through your own work and make changes. And one of the hardest parts, I think, of working with a novel is just the volume and staying organized and remembering to keep track of the details. And I'm a very detail organized person, you know. So it's, even for me, it's like, wow, dealing with the number of pages and drafts and those things. So 2023 was revisions. I did 2 drafts last year, and then the beginning of this year I started my 5th draft. And I was about a third of the way when I took on this long call substitute teaching job in March. And so it actually will be good, because I'm taking now a couple months off and just letting the work sit, which is what had been recommended to me all along, is to take breaks between drafts. And of course, I was being stubborn and not listening. So this is a forced break from the work. And then I'll return to it in June when I'm done teaching. So, yeah.
And so when you say you'll return to it, like, are you not touching it at all? Have you haven't opened a file? You haven't pulled out a printed manuscript? Nothing?
No.
Okay.
No, I have.
Are you saying that because someone's listening and they're checking in on you to make sure that you're not doing that, or are you actually not doing it?
Well, I swear, I have
Okay.
not touched it. I have thought about it.
Yeah. How can you not?
What's really strange about it is you feel this like a little bit of guilt. Like you just want to work on it and
Yeah.
you want to keep pushing the ball up the hill, right? But in my spare bedroom where my desk is, at the beginning of this year, I didn't. My husband installed this massive whiteboard for me, and I have all of my scenes like sketched out on Post-it notes and all of these notes and things. So like every time I'm going in there, I'm sort of standing in front of the board and looking at it and thinking about things, and I'm still
Like, do
talking.
you brush your teeth in front of it? Like, yeah.
No, not like that, but I do when I feel like I just need a moment to think about it and
Yeah.
feel back in that world. I'll go stand in front of it, but I'm forcing myself not to write
Sure.
and not to get out the draft. However, I have been still talking with some of my writer friends and doing catch-ups and things with them. And so, like, my book will come up, of course, in those conversations, but I'm not actively writing new sentences.
And these friends of yours that are also writers and are working on their own novels, are they like happy for you that you're in a break? Like, do they kind of long for that themselves a little bit? Like, how, when you tell them like, I'm not actually touching it at all right now, like, what's their response? How do they feel about that?
They're like, thank God.
Yeah.
You deserve a break because they know how stubborn I am.
Yeah.
And so, yeah, they're a lot of them are much better about flowing with their work, you know, where it's like you have these spurts where you're working really hard on something and then they take breaks. But for me, like I have freelance work that I'm doing outside of the novel writing, but I didn't have my other commitments were maybe fewer than some of my other writer friends. And so I sort of justified it that I have the time to do this. And like, while I have the time to do this, I need to capitalize on that time. But one of the interesting things that I've been finding is that, especially with novel writing, it's not always the amount of time that makes the biggest difference, because you can, after a certain amount of hours in the chair, you know, the return on investment starts to go
Way down.
down.
Yeah.
And so for me, it's actually better to have less time and to make better use of the hours that I do have.
I feel, similar kinds of things. Deadlines are super helpful to me. If I need to get a bunch of emailing done, if there's like a big task, feeling a little bit under the gun for me is something that actually is really, really helpful. One of the things that you said is you feel guilt. We just like talk about that a little bit. Do you feel like you have guilt because you've already invested so much time and you want it done? Like your friends in the book that you're writing about, like their story isn't out yet. Like where does the guilt come from, do you think?
Yeah, I think, the guilt comes from, I think, the own expectations I put on myself, and seeing, we're in the constant news cycle, right? So like I can't go on social media without seeing other authors publishing books, or it's like everyone under the sun has gotten a book deal, you know, or all of these things. So it's kind of like you feel like and the hard part about writing in any creative pursuit is that like if you're not doing the work, it's not getting done. It's not like I have a whole team that's like, go ahead, Katie, like you take a break. We got these chapters, go on and rest. It's just like, if I'm not doing it, then it's stagnant.
Yeah.
And so I think that's where some of the guilt comes from. And obviously I have some perfectionistic tendencies that this whole process has forced me to reckon with, and just being okay with things not being perfect the first time or the second time or the 10th time.
Right.
Because that is just the nature of writing, is editing. Like the perfection comes during editing, but after a million rounds, I think I notice that when I am like holding the work too tight, like trying to get the character right, the scene right, the dialogue right, and trying to do everything at once, the whole thing just falls apart. But allowing myself just to move through the scene one time through and just kind of get like the scaffolding there, and then allow myself to go back, you know, whatever it is, weeks later, the next day, and like work on one other thing, whether it's like the characterization or the dialogue. It's kind of doing it bit by bit, which is not a way I've ever had to work before. So that has taken some getting used to too.
So I think I know enough about the process. Editing, it's like when you're working with your editor, this isn't like they're checking your spelling and grammar. This is someone that is like helping you shape the actual story itself, right? What's the process like with like, how do you find someone that you can trust? Because really, you're just you're just asking for their opinion.
Oh
right?
yeah, and expertise.
Yeah, and so like, how do you find an editor like that? And then when an editor who you've established that I like your opinion enough that I'd like you to weigh in on this, but when they come back with like a big edit, like I think that whole character should go, or this chapter doesn't make sense. Like, how do you kind of wrestle with some of that in the kind of intense creative process?
Yeah, I'm still very much in that. And I should be clear that my book is still being developed so that I can get an agent and an agent can sell it to an actual editor.
Right.
That's my ultimate goal. And so the editor that I hired was a freelance editor. She's actually a quite well-known author who does some editing on the side. And
Is it the woman who writes the vampire books?
No.
No, okay.
No, it's actually just this woman named Colleen Hoover. Have you ever heard of her?
No.
No, I'm just kidding.
Is Colleen Hoover, is that a famous?
Oh my gosh.
Okay,
yeah,
all right.
maybe just go check the New York Times
Okay.
bestseller list after this
Great.
recording, okay?
All right.
So I hired her to just help me shape at a high level.
Okay.
And she gave me, there was some specific feedback, but mostly it's like pacing and am I hitting like the big story beats? And that's one of the, I think, biggest things to come out of the last couple of years is just like understanding that regardless of the story that you're telling, there's like certain beats that these, like a show that you watch, movies, books, they all hit these certain beats. And if it's done right, you don't even notice it as a viewer.
Yep.
But it's like, oh, wow, I'm getting this backstory at exactly the right time so that I can make sense of the present.
Interesting how that's happening.
Right. Yeah. And so it's like, there's so much more that goes into it. And so my editor really helped with the organization of some of that, gave me some ideas, and ultimately it was up to me to go back in and fix everything, which is a huge process. But yeah, that's mostly what she looked at.
And then like when she says, I think you should cut X, Y, and Z, or this thing doesn't make sense, like, I mean, what is that like as a creative person? Like, how do you receive that feedback? And yeah, just what's that process like?
I think because I've heard kind of some horror stories of authors pushing back and not being flexible with their work, but I think I'm still so new that and to work with someone like that, I was like, please tell me everything.
That's great.
Yeah, like I've learned, there are certain things I learned from her feedback that I'll take with me for the rest of my
That's great.
career. So yeah, I've been very receptive to that. Now, when I get to working with an editor at a pub house, like I assume the edits will be much different from what I've been told from my other author friends, but
Like more severe?
yeah, just more intense.
Yeah.
Like you're looking high level and then it gets like more granular as the edits go on. So there may be things where it's like, no, I want that there, but.
And so then is that the kind of thing where like you are looking for potentially a different publisher then? If someone comes and they say like, we kind of like your story, we'd like you to change it in all of these ways. Obviously you're doing some sort of calculus where you're saying like,
Right.
I'd like to be published, but you're asking me to sacrifice too much and then you don't go with them?
Yeah, I mean, I think I've heard horror stories like that too, where people just are so desperate to get published that they're willing to just like morph their work into whatever the publisher wants. I do think you have to go in with a very strong vision of what you want. And that's part of where the agent-author relationship comes in too, from what I understand. Again, I don't have an agent yet.
Yeah.
That is why I've been developing my book to the way that I want it to be, because the better it is on this end, the better likelihood of getting an agent, which is an extremely competitive process. And like the better the agent, the better connections that they have to different publishing houses and so on and so forth. But yeah, I think the ideal situation is having an agent that sees your vision for the work, and he or she then, when they approach the editor, there isn't like room for those sorts of things to happen. And if it does, they know that it's not the right fit. And it's easy for me to say that on this side, but if there are multiple editors that come to the table interested in purchasing the manuscript, well, then you can just move on
Right.
to someone else. But if there's only one person and you're getting one offer, I can see how that would be really hard to turn that down.
Yeah.
Because it's like, well, I either...
Is this my shot?
Yeah, yeah. And so I think at that point you need to look within and decide what your story's worth.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Cool. One of the things that you said too is kind of about taste. I think just in the creative process, I've experienced this over the years, and I don't remember when it was, but someone kind of illuminated or highlighted one of these kind of like problems in the creative process. So as a photographer, like I'll just speak to this, right? Because that's from my kind of vantage point. The reason I wanted to be a photographer is because I liked photos, and so I'm not a photographer. At the time, I wasn't a photographer. And so like anybody that's taking photos, they're for sure better than mine. But then like the more you get into it, your taste gets refined a little bit. And you're like, oh, I like this. And I think that person, for me, Annie Leibovitz, I think she's the very greatest to have ever done it ever. Full stop. There isn't a better one.
Yeah.
And so in looking at her work, I'm like, that's what I want to do someday. I'd like to shoot like Annie Leibovitz. But then the problem is that like then you pick up a camera and you see your first images that you create and you're like, wow, there's a problem here. This is absolutely problematic because what I just created is garbage in comparison to this. And so like you got into it because you're looking at something incredible and then you produce something bad. And I think for me, and I think for lots of people, it's like, can you kind of stay humble enough while you're working on that thing where you keep looking and saying like, this thing is good and you don't think too highly of yourself? Because otherwise I think you stagnate and then you don't end up getting there.
Right.
But it's this taste that drives you into this thing. And then hopefully good sense comes with it where you're like, oh yeah, I'm not actually that thing yet. Are there authors and people that you have looked to and said like, man, I love the way she, like writes a character and I love the way this guy, like weaves a narrative together. Are there people that you're looking at?
Yeah, like kind of like North Star books.
Yeah.
I love Ann Patchett. Do you read Ann Patchett?
No, then I'm so sorry.
Well, you should.
Okay.
She is just...
I'm going to take a note right now.
Yeah.
Which one?
Oh, her books?
Yeah, which one?
Oh, The Dutch House.
Okay.
You have to start there. And then her book from last summer. Why am I blanking on the name now? Oh, Tom Lake. That came out last summer. So she is just, I think, a pillar in American fiction right now. I love Kylie Reed for contemporary fiction, cultural commentary, which is the vein that my book will sit in, is cultural commentary. I love Emma Cline's sentences and the way that she tells stories. The book Sorrow and Bliss by Meg Mason is just a 5-star. So it's realism, but it's about mental health, but it's funny and it's just like so full of like vibrant characters that feel real. And I think that's really what I strive to do, is like create real situations. Like, of course they're fictionalized, and things that haven't happened but could, and people that allow people to see themselves within a book. And so, yeah, those are authors that come to mind right now.
So maybe just for a little frame of reference, here's where I'm at in kind of my reading journey right now.
Okay.
Could I interest you in some Wendell Berry?
I mean...
Have you ever read Wendell Berry?
I can't comment on Wendell because I have not read Wendell.
Okay.
So...
But like this is kind of where I'm at. Like
Okay.
I kind of like yearn for dirt and for land and
Sure.
for like having a hobby farm. Like this is kind of where I'm at in my life right now. So Wendell Berry happens to be
he hits.
oh, he hits hard.
Yeah.
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 They feel like stories kind of about nothing. And it's just this incredible character development and I just love it.
Yeah. With my 8th graders at Cathedral, we're reading The Maze Runner right now. Did you ever read that?
No. They made a movie about it. I think I saw a
There's
preview.
a couple movies. Yeah. And so
Kind of dystopian.
Yes.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, it's like modern. It's the modern version of Lord of the Flies, which
Okay.
we probably read it. I read in high school. Did you read in high school?
I read a lot in high school. I don't know if I read that in high school. Wasn't Jeff Goldblum Wasn't there a... No, that was just The Fly. It was just The Fly. Hi, Jeff. Sorry about that.
Shout out.
Yeah. I mean, I'm familiar with the story.
Okay, yes. So
All right.
Anyway, that book has been, I don't know, a little bit of a breath of fresh air in coming from like the literary world. It's like, all right, plot driven, easy peasy.
Cool. Do you like bubblegum fiction? I mean, are there novels that come out like a summer flick, like something with some sort of explode? You know, the equivalent of like in the summer, I'm gonna go see something that explodes, and I'm gonna eat some popcorn at the movie theater. Do you have like an equivalent of that in reading in novels?
I need that.
Okay.
It's actually something I'm in the market for. You know, like some Emily Henry romance novels.
Sure.
Like just
Are these the ones on the
light,
cover
fun.
with like Fabio with the blonde hair and
No,
rippling
no, no.
muscles?
She's
No.
not in that vein.
Okay.
She's like contemporary romance
Okay.
stories. Yeah, yeah.
Have you ever read Harry Potter?
Yes, of course.
Okay. Well,
But I didn't read it until I was in college.
I didn't read
Yeah.
it. I didn't read it until just a few years ago.
Oh, wow.
Like I'm a little bit of a contrarian.
Okay.
Like if everybody is like, this is the best show ever, I'm like, I'll maybe think about that in 10 years. You know, like I have a little bit of that. So when everyone was reading Harry Potter, I was like, get out of here with that. I don't have time
You were
for
like
that.
10 too.
Well,
So that started young.
I guess
that
middle school.
pushback.
Oh yeah. Oh, but like middle school, high school, always. And then like I was in college when the last one came out, and these kids were just like obsessed, staying up late so they could get the book. And I was like, don't you have like a test to study for? You know, like a little smug like that. And then a few years ago, I read them, and I was like, oh my word, this is so it's
Delightful.
It's so delightful.
Yeah.
I had just finished rereading because nerd. I had just finished rereading Lord of the Rings, which I don't know if you've ever.
Never read that.
It's like my little analogy for Lord of the Rings. It's like eating a Thanksgiving meal. It's so heavy and so weighty. I mean, there's a lot to it. Like it's just like it's thick.
Yeah.
And it's world building, and he writes his own languages and poems, and you know, like it's stuff I think most writers don't end up doing because it just takes so much work. You have to write a great narrative, and then you know, massive amounts of backstory. I mean, he wrote, again, nerd stuff here, but the Silmarillion, it's like a history book. It's a history book for the pretend world that he invented, right? So I just got done with that. I was like, oh, fantasy is fun. You know, like every once in a while, just like unplugging from my like heavier whatever reading that I do.
Yeah.
And I was like, I want to do something in the fantasy realm again. And so many people had said Harry Potter, and so I jumped in. And then because I had just thought, this is like Thanksgiving, this is like a Thanksgiving meal, this is my analogy. You ready for it? Harry Potter is like...
Can I guess?
Yeah.
Popcorn.
It's like pumpkin pie.
Yeah.
And here's the deal. It might not even be the pumpkin pie. It might just be the whipped cream that's on the pumpkin pie. But if you let it be whipped cream, and you don't expect it to be mashed potatoes and turkey and gravy and stuffing or whatever, you can really, really enjoy it. Like really enjoy it. And like I just like let it be the thing that it was. And I had an absolutely delightful time. And then when it was done, my wife teased me for this, but like I told her one night, because I didn't have it to read anymore. And I said, I miss my friend Harry. I'm 38. This is probably 4 years ago. Now I was 34 years old. And I said, I miss my friend Harry. So anyway, it was good. There it is.
And now you understand why it was a cultural phenomenon.
100%. And to all of the people who I, kind of like spoke down to about your obsession with Harry Potter, I get it. I'm here with you now. It just took me a little time, and I'm so sorry.
Well, in 10 years, you might want to take a listen to a little artist named Taylor Swift.
She's not going anywhere. Don't waste your time. Taylor Swift ain't going anywhere. Here's what I know about Taylor Swift. She puts on a heck of a show.
Let's hear it.
She, I think, has made all of the money in the whole world. I think like when you total
We have
it up,
nothing left.
There's nothing else.
No.
It's all hers. And I don't think there's a person alive with the cultural pull that she does. The way that she can affect whatever she wants to affect, whenever she wants to affect it, has been like from the periphery. Again, I don't really listen to her music, but just the way she can affect something when she puts her influence on it is fascinating. Absolutely fascinating to watch. Are you?
I mean, Drake moved his album when he heard hers was dropping. So if you're getting Drake to step aside, like
Champagne Poppy.
respect.
Yeah.
Respect.
Wow. There it is. Taylor Swift, everybody. We went from Wendell-Berry.
We are swinging the pendulum hard.
Yeah, from Wendell-Berry to Taylor Swift. We did it, guys. 8 degrees
Has
of
there
separation.
ever been such a connection?
I don't think so.
I don't think so.
Wow. Okay, well, sweet. Katie, it's really fun to hear just about your book. From the day that you told me about it, I'm excited. I'm like, the day that it's out, I'll be at Barnes & Noble or Amazon, wherever we buy books now. I think Amazon is primarily where I buy books.
Preferably from your independent bookstore, Guy.
Do we have one?
Barnes & Noble.
Do we actually have one? I mean, we have Books Revisited
We have
downtown.
Books Revisited. Barnes & Noble is our local bookstore, but also I buy most of my books. When I buy them new, I buy them through bookshop.org.
Okay.
So there's a little plug.
What is different about...
Bookshop.org
Yeah.
allows you to support independent bookstores.
So you, like, buy it
that
from them,
places
and
like
then you-
Amazon don't force them to close
All right.
by doing all the things that Amazon loves to do.
Right.
So I usually try to buy my books through bookshop.org. You can connect it to different organizations. Will have like I have certain podcasts that I listen to that have a bookshop.org page where if they have guests or authors that come on, they'll have their books there, but then also independent bookstores have a presence on bookshop.org. So if you purchase there, you can connect it so they get a kickback.
Cool.
So,
Well, everyone, you heard it here first. You can find this podcast on bookshop.org. Go support my friend Katie Virnig. No, I'm just kidding. Okay, Katie. Some of the other writing that you've done, you have, you worked for St. Cloud Shines. You helped write for St. Cloud Shines. You helped create St. Cloud Shines. Maybe for those of our listeners who maybe don't know, maybe just unpack that a little bit and tell us what it is and why you're kind of excited to get behind a project like that.
yeah, so I took on the St. Cloud, I'll take a step back. So in 2018, when I first started freelancing, I got connected to the Greater St. Cloud Development Corporation through my friend, Shannon Weeger, who I know has been a podcast guest.
Hey, Shannon.
The ultimate connector, Shannon Weeger, connected me with GSDC, and they were wanting to revamp some of their marketing. And so I had this idea sort of brewing about, at that point, like 2018 was massive for the influencer industry. Of course, it's still massive, still growing. But I just had this like idea in my mind for cities to have sort of that personable presence online the same way that people built brands online. And I was already helping the GSDC with a few other like smaller projects, blogs and such. And so I pitched it to them as this idea of like building a social media only brand for the city of St. Cloud. And I sold it in. They loved it, and of course I had all sorts of people in-house with the GCC and other people like Lacey Shermers, Shannon, several people, Savannah Pearson, who helped me like bring it to life. But yeah, for that first year in 2019 when we launched it, I did all the writing and content planning, social media management, which bless anyone who does that full time and deals with the back end of Facebook, because wow, if you don't ever have to go behind the scenes in Facebook, don't do it. So there was a lot that went into it, but I managed it in 2019 through the summer of 2020. And then when I had started that creative writing class that I had mentioned and knew I wanted to focus on the book and figuring out fiction, since I didn't have any background in fiction. And so I handed the project off to Greenline Marketing, who is still managing it today. But yeah, so.
Hi, Bridget.
Hi, Bridget. You're doing a great job. So that was, my interest already and background in social media and whatever, cut this. That's probably a good enough place to stop. I mean, should I go further?
I don't know. Maybe tell me a little bit more about like, what was the problem you were trying to solve?
Well, okay. Well, the problem that I don't even want to say the problem we were trying to solve, but I guess the need we were trying to meet.
There you go.
Was just more positive PR. because we know that St. Cloud doesn't attract the best PR.
Yeah.
And so one way to combat that is to put more positive things out there, because it's not like there wasn't anything going on that was positive. There's so many things that are positive. And I mean, as you put together your list for this podcast, you're probably like, wow, we should talk to this person, because there's so many great people around here doing really cool things. It's just not really talked about in the way that it's talked about in other places that have, different types of resources. And so I just wanted to create a place, a brand that was centered on positive things happening in the community, in the greater community.
Yeah.
And I think that's really where it spoke to the GSDC as an organization that is designed to cover and reach the 3-county area. Because I think there is that tendency for each city to do its own thing, right? They each have their own budget, they each have their own this and that. But what was great, and it is great about St. Cloud Shines and the GSDC, is the whole region got recognized, and we're pulling things from all the communities. And so that was a big part of the creation of it, is like making sure that across the board we're covering all the cities.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Sweet. We got to be a part, I think it was maybe a couple summers ago, maybe. We made I guess we've done a good handful of videos for St. Cloud Shines, but a really, really fun one was kind of like a drive through central Minnesota.
Yeah.
And it was just such a riot to work with them, to work with Bridget, and how do we, in 90 seconds, how do we, in a really fun way, kind of highlight our community? And so well done on that. Such a fun project. I'm thankful that it exists. Switchboard loves being a part of that, and in the ways that we've been able to be a part of it.
Yeah, I love to see it live on. I'm still obsessed with the logo.
Yeah, fun.
It brings me so much joy.
Yeah, good. I mean, what you just said there is similar to why we even started the podcast. It's like there are so many incredible things that are happening in our community. There are so many wonderful people that are doing really remarkable things. And we just wanted to give another voice. We're not the first one. We won't be the last one. But I don't think you can have too many people trying to put a megaphone up to the mouth of our great community. And so that's what we're trying to do with this podcast too. And talk to really fun, really, really interesting people. And even I don't think we've actually said this on the podcast yet, but one of the things that we're thinking about, and you can maybe tell me, an audience, I guess you can throw a comment in there if you think this is silly.
We're workshopping right now?
Yeah, good.
All right.
There's also this little idea of let's say you're at a restaurant or something. I'm thinking if I'm sitting at a restaurant and I'm just a remarkable server, they just thread the needle perfectly. They're attentive, but without being overbearing. They're fun without trying to crack jokes or whatever. They just kind of thread that needle, and you're somehow either you were born with it or you've honed this thing, but you were really good at customer service.
Yeah.
I have this little idea. I want to ask them, would you like to come and be on a podcast where we talk about all kinds of things that are in central Minnesota, which happens to be you, and just invite them on and just see what a conversation would be like. I don't know you at all. I just engaged with you because you were a server at the restaurant that I was at. What do you think? Is that?
You might want to have a screening process.
I guess we don't technically have
maybe
to
a little
air
Google
them.
form with a few questions, and then if they pass that round, then you're like, okay, you could come on and tell a story.
All right. So we'll keep workshopping it. You weren't sold, but maybe with some caveats, you could be convinced it's an all right idea.
Yeah.
Okay.
It could be risky, but it could have a huge payoff.
I think the risk is part of the fun.
Yeah,
Like,
that's
hi,
true.
I don't know you at all, other than you set my chicken down at my table.
But also, you're under no obligation to post it.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Okay, Katie, thanks so much for coming and joining us on the podcast. It was really a treat to talk about all of this kind of fun stuff, and even just like kind of your creative process, which is on clear display with your book, but even that same process being, present as you started St. Cloud Shines, and how our community is still benefiting from that. I think that's super, super fun. I know you didn't like talk tons about like some of the specifics of your book, but when it's done, which I'm so excited for, Would you come back on? Again, this is a new podcast, but I think I want to do that thing where I'll read your book before you come.
Oh my gosh,
And then
absolutely.
we'll like, talk about it.
Yes.
Because I think that's what other podcasts
Yes,
do.
like we have like an NPR style where you like lower
We have
your
to talk
voice.
like this, though.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Good.
And then you play like little audio clips
Yep.
like throughout.
Yeah.
Like now we're gonna listen to a clip.
Here's the deal. If you
Yeah.
prepare the audio clips, or
Okay.
maybe I'll just
Yes.
maybe I'll highlight some book, I'll highlight some stuff, and I
Yes.
just hand you my book and say like, could you read this?
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
Absolutely.
We'll
Yeah.
figure it
Yeah.
out. That'll be so fun.
I will come back on. I'll tell you all about it. Like I said before, like I'm still very much in the process
Yeah.
of developing it. So I have no idea when it will come out, but I hope it's within the next few years.
Yeah. Fun.
And I literally keep my social media accounts open for that reason.
That's great.
And so I'll be posting on there too.
Fun. Well, I'm looking forward to it. Congrats on just like jumping in. You know, like seriously, I'm kind of like proud of you. You know, just like as my
Thank
friend,
you.
you're just
Yeah.
the way that you've gone about this and your process it's been fun to watch, and your kind of commitment and dedication to it has been very admirable. So
Thank you.
excited to read it.
Thank you.
Excited to have you back on. We'll have fun doing that.
Yeah.
As we're getting ready to end, we always end with an unpaid advertisement. Is there something that you want to plug? It could be anything.
Okay. This is not a serious plug, but also it could change your life. So you can decide
All right.
how you want to take this. So recently I was on a very early flight back from Texas. It was about 5 a.m, and I'm going through security thinking like, I'm not happy right now. I'm very tired.
Because it's 5 a.m.
It's
and
5
you're
in the
going through
morning, and I
TSA.
was at a wedding the night before, and I just like needed something to just help.
Yeah.
And so I went to this cafe, and they had, I've never seen this before, a peanut butter and jelly granola sandwich.
Okay.
And I thought,
Almost like chips.
almost like the same effect as when you add
Yeah.
chips to like a Sloppy Joe
Yeah.
or a Jimmy John's
Yeah.
sandwich or whatever. The same idea. Like it was the most simple but brilliant invention that I've seen in a long time. And so I had to get it and absolutely devoured it on the plate. It was like straight up like Concord grape
Yeah.
jelly, probably Jif.
Yep.
I don't know. It was divine. So my hot tip then would be to get yourself a snack when you're going through the airport at 5 a.m. And if you can find a peanut butter jelly granola sandwich,
You got to try
you
it.
must try it.
Okay.
And if you can't find it, make it yourself. Because
All right.
it's 10 out of 10.
All right. Wonderful. Well, my my unpaid advertisement today is for a little thing called the New York Times mini crossword.
Have you heard of it?
Have you anyone ever heard of it? Here's what I will say. Get out of here with your garbage Wordle. All right? Get out of here with that trash game. Like let's talk about the mini crossword, which is
It doesn't get enough love.
no, it's
Yeah.
maybe like 90 of my favorite seconds every day is just doing the crossword. It's a blast. I have a few friends that like we're always competing with each other. We have a spreadsheet. Mike, Jay, hello. We have this like ongoing competition, and it's just so much fun. I absolutely love it. It's like you need to, like it's just enough pop culture. It's just enough like kind of cultural references, and anyway, it's so much fun, and I love it. So you should.
Do you ever cheat?
No cheating, never. And like, well, what do you mean by cheating?
Like you look up the
never,
answers?
never. Atrocious. Would you cheat?
Of course not.
Okay, good. Yeah, no, never.
But there's no way that you know every word every day. Do you?
yeah.
Well,
Like I'm pretty good at it.
Guy.
I think I'm pretty good at it. I mean, sometimes you need context clues. Which is like the thing with the crossword is you're triangulating. You're like, I don't know what this one is.
Yeah.
But then you get a couple in, and you're like, of course, that's what it is. Also, this just in, Oreo makes, I bet you, every 8 days. It's not once a week, but every 8 days, Oreo, like the cookie, makes an appearance. Hot tip.
wow. Do you think Nabisco pays the New York Times for
No,
that
I think it
little
just
plug?
fits. It's just like,
It's like-
it's a great filler word.
3 vowels.
Yeah.
Like,
Yeah,
it does
you can do
a lot
with
of heavy
it.
lifting.
A lot of heavy lifting. So, All right. Well, sweet. Katie, thank you for coming on.
Thank
I
you
appreciate
so
it
much.
so much. It was a treat. And seriously, I'm really looking forward to having you back on when your book is
Thanks,
done.
Guy. We'll talk soon.
Bye. Like we just like hung up like on the phone.
Oh,
We'll
bye.
talk soon.
Yeah.
Bye.
Bye.
Cool. All right.